difference between compassion and candor. I learned more recently a new philosophy I'm still trying to get my hands around, and that is that clarity from a leader is kindness. Let's dig into that a little bit today on Leading Leaders. Stay tuned.
Think storytelling's just for bedtime? Nah, it's the secret sauce for business magic. Stuck in a rut with bland pitches and yawning clients? Enter Boost Your Business with StoryPower. 6 weeks of epic storytelling training. It's like leveling up in a video game but for your career. Master the art of narrative and watch connections blossom like a viral TikTok. Simple, impactful, and game-changing. Ready to transform your biz vibes? Dive in now and make storytelling your superpower.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at StoryPowerAcademy.com for leadership development and communication skills training.
I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. Just recently, while working with a client, I was challenged when they accosted, accused. I'm not even sure what it was. They disagreed with one of my heroes. And it really wasn't even a disagreement. It really wasn't even an accusation. It was just hey, well, if they followed your philosophy, which is pretty solid, don't just tell me how to do it, show me how to do it, which, like John Maxwell says, leaders know the way, go the way, and show the way. Meaning, why would you teach me something you don't know how to do? If you've never done it before, if you haven't had the experience, why would you do it? And if you have a solution that doesn't work for you, why would you make that solution available to others? Why would you make it prominent to others? Now, I do realize, for an example, Steve Siebold, and if you go all the way back to the beginning of coaching, Christian Simpson teaches it as well. Most people, I can't think of Melvin's first name, in the world of coaching. I don't mean athletic coaching. I don't mean mentoring. I don't mean training. I mean coaching. The process of coaching is to help someone find the answer that's already in them, which would mean you may have a skill set, an understanding, an ability to do something this guy doesn't possess. Yet through the coaching method, through asking questions that cause you to reveal to yourself what you maybe have been hiding intentionally, and maybe just it hadn't dawned on you yet, but you haven't poked at it from all the different directions. Right? The question's in there, the answer's actually in there, and if I poked you long enough, you'd actually come up with the answer because you already know it, you just haven't put two and two together, so to speak. The coaching method sometimes will reveal that the coach is clueless about the process, the topic, even the instruction necessary to take this skill set to the next level. In fact, when the industry of coaching, as I've heard it, when the industry of coaching came around, the kind of coaching that we do these days, again, not a football coach, not a coach in a specific sport, a coach in the world of mental coaching. They were tennis players who were stuck at a level, a plateau that they just couldn't get past. And all the great tennis coaches in the world would come in and work with them, and they just couldn't take it to the next level. They were coming up on a major Olympic trial, and they weren't ready. And so they brought in a bunch of people who are great at the coaching process, meaning they knew how to ask deep, probative, curiosity-based questions and help someone process through what those answers might look like, but they'd never even held a tennis racket in a competitive way. Those people, expert in the process of asking clarifying questions, helped the tennis team take their game to the next level. And the reason was, it wasn't anything new they needed to learn. They didn't need to be taught. It wasn't something necessarily that they were doing wrong. They didn't need to be corrected. It wasn't that their life was an absolute mess, and so there was just a downstream trickle of failure. No, it was none of that. It was none of that. It was like you hear often from great leaders, great experts, great athletes. You might hear a phrase like this: so-and-so has forgotten more than I will ever know about this thing. David Barton has forgotten more about American history than I have ever studied in my life, perhaps will ever know in my life. Why? It's his area of expertise. It's his area of interest. David Barton has studied American history and the founders and who they were before they came here ad nauseum. He's been teaching on it for, I don't know, close to 25 years, maybe more. And because that's true, if he tried to run through today everything that he's learned about it, not only would it be exhaustive and you wouldn't be able to keep up with all of it, but there'd probably be some things that he'd leave out. Literally, he forgot to include them, not because he didn't know them. It's just that today's fresh information means that has become either obsolete or it's already woven into what I'm teaching. See, here's what happens in today's world where skill sets are waning. My father-in-law, when he got out of the Air Force, understood that programming computers was going to be the next big thing. Now, he got out of the Air Force before I was married to his daughter. It's been a minute. Like 45 years ago, he got out of the Air Force after he retired. When he got out, he went to school to become a computer programmer. And in that season, what he learned was CSS and COBOL. Now, if I said that to a 20-year-old today who's making $50,000, $80,000, $150,000 programming things at Meta, they're like, oh, so he learned to suntan dinosaurs, because holy cow, that's old, right? There are people today who speak into their cellular devices and write code for apps using intelligence of a certain type that don't even know what COBOL was. These are people who are programming your financial institutions. These are young people, maybe not even old enough to vote yet, not even out of high school yet, and they're writing algorithms. They're creating applications. They're changing policies for the next 50 years. But they don't understand all the things that went into it way back when. See, a coach's job, a leader's job, because a great leader should be a great coach, is to help people draw from themselves what they need in the moment that maybe they've forgotten they used in the past. All those ideas that worked way back when, and you kind of thought, we're past that. Those are old news. If you've watched Leading Leaders podcast for any period of time, you probably know I have a deep foundation in the old stuff, partly because I'm an old dude. But I also look back at those foundational principles of life, of relationships, of business building. And I realize that we may see a morph or an evolution of a lot of things that are like the rip currents in the rapids of a waterfall, or in the rapids of a river running through a canyon. But it's still water. It still behaves a similar way. When it crashes into a rock and it has to change directions, before erosion sets in and that rock eventually gives way, that water is going to splash and it's going to turn. And if what's underneath it is giving a circular motion, you're going to have currents coming from multiple directions just because the water's changing directions. That's true in business. It's true in finance. It's true in relationships. When turmoil comes, nothing stays the same. That's why we call it turmoil. When you're unclear about what's coming next, when you can't see around the corner, when it's a foggy day, when business is evolving, when the financial markets are changing. I mean, 5 years ago, people said, one day gold's going to go up, but today I'm investing in Bitcoin. Okay, here we are 5 years later, and there are people who are going, man, I'm trying to get out of my digital currencies as fast as I can. I want to get back in gold. Well, now the price is so high you can't. I know people who've been mining Bitcoin for, I don't know, 15 years, as long as you've been able to. They started off with 1 or 2 Bitcoin and they thought, this is incredible. That's like $3,500. I could take a vacation on that. Well, now they've got Bitcoins that are various types. Bitcoin is only one brand name. I don't know them all. That's not my wheelhouse. But there are digital currencies out there that you could buy a yacht with one of them. That volatility, that changing move in value, and where do I put my investments, and how do I stay on top of the game, and who do I trust with the right ideas and the right investments, and are people just giving me the idea because it suits them profitability-wise, or is this really good, sound, long-term advice? And there are some principles that you've got to be able to get back to, some core values that never change. The nature of water doesn't change. It's still water. It still behaves the same way. And for what it's worth, sound and water have a very, very close similarity. So does electricity. They all flow to the path of least resistance. They all will bounce. When resistance comes, friction happens. That's true in all of those things. And if you could see them, you would see that that's true in laser light, even though it moves faster than the eye. It's true in electric energy like EMFs, cellular signals, radio waves, microwaves. All of these things, they react in a very similar way to water. When you understand that as a core principle, then you understand that in each of those dynamic relationships, they're going to do a very similar thing. Humans are not different. Humans have some very core principles, the way we react to things, the way we react to pain, the way we react to confusion, the way we react to hardship, heartache, broken relationships, financial dismay. Humans, generally speaking, react to those things pretty similarly, which makes it really easy to control a large mass when you know how humans react to fear, or humans react to pain, or humans react to uncertainty. You can create those environments just like you might put rocks in a river to create a jetty to speed up the water so you can cleanse it. It's possible to control. It's possible to predict the outcome. So one of the anchor philosophies that I hold on to, knowing what coaching does, ask the question to get you to reveal the answer. See, these coaches that went into the tennis players, they just say, well, what if you did do it like this? Well, we used to do it like that and we stopped doing it. Why? Well, because we thought this new way was going to be better. Well, what if you tried the old way now? Oh, well, look, it worked. How weird is that? Who knew that if you put rocks in the river, you could change the course of the river? Who knew that if you put rocks in the river or built a beaver dam or dug a trench that was 5 feet lower, that you could create the Panama Canal or locks? Or I recently was watching a video of a bridge where they didn't put the cars over the water, they put the water over the cars. They put the bridge is actually a tunnel. It goes under the lake where the boats don't have to go through opening gates and channels and all that other stuff. They just float right across on the lake, and the cars actually go under the lake and pop back up on the other side. Fascinating idea. Aside from the channel between England and the mainland of Europe, I don't know many other places where the cars go under the water and the boats go over the top. Pretty cool idea. It's a new way of doing things. Why haven't we always done it that way? I don't know. Maybe it's a new idea. Maybe they're going to find that even though the boat is in the water, floating in the water, the amount of pressure that water is putting on the top of that tunnel is added to, it's magnified by the weight of the boat and its cargo and the people on it. And in the same way that you look at it and go, well, a house sits on the ground. I mean, what does gravity have to do with that? It's a house. It's on the ground. Okay. Ask a true engineer, an architect. And one of the things they'll tell you is that the weight of that building is going to tell you how deep the foundation has to be. It's going to tell you what kind of dirt foundation has to be under the platform, which is what we normally call the foundation, the concrete, because those things are, ready for this? Big word, foundational. That's what everything rests on. They're like the principles of water moving against the course of the river, the rocks, the friction, the erosion. Those things are different in the circumstances, but they're not different in their formulation. They're not different in their foundation. They're still the same. All right, so what does coaching have to do with water flow? It has to do with your foundation of your house and financial markets. Let me sum it up like this. It was hard for me to come to this conclusion. And I say hard because I didn't want it to be true. But it is true. In the best of times, when everything is going the way you want to and cash is flowing and the bills are paid and your neighbors are happy with you and your relationship is on track and everybody is ecstatic and all of life is rainbows and cupcakes. Know this. It won't always be like this. It's just life. It's inevitable. Something calamitous is coming. Maybe not in the next 2 weeks, maybe not in the next 2 months, maybe not in the next 2 years, maybe not even in the next 2 decades. But life is an ebb and flow, and part of what we learn is that it's going to be good and it's going to be bad. And then it's going to be good again because it can't always stay bad. Now, how long is bad? That's another question. How long does good last? Well, that's another question. Maybe you should consider asking Viktor Frankl that, Man's Search for Meaning. Because he was the guy who lived through the concentration camps of the Second World War. He was the guy who wrote a book in that time that talked about when we can hold on to our meaning, we can hold on to our joy, even when all of the circumstances around us are a disaster. So that core philosophy for me has to balance those two truths. It hasn't always been this way. It won't always be this way. Viktor Frankl had a normal life before the concentration camps. He went on to have a semi-normal life after the concentration camps. But in that season, 2 years, 2 months, 5 years, 50 months, who knows how long the tragedy of his life held on as he watched loved one after loved one after loved one be extinguished. It wasn't the same after that. That's not what life was before that. But I don't know how life gets much worse than that. And if you can live through that and find on the other side that it hasn't always been this way, and it won't always be this way. It won't always be sunshine and roses, and it won't always be dark clouds and storms. If you hold on to that as an anchor philosophy, like the movement of water or electrical signals or the energy of your own body, then you can understand that things change. And a leader's greatest kindness in that reality is clarity. To help someone see when the disaster in front of them is immeasurable and unfixable. When they look at it and they go, well, if you would give me more money, or if I could get more time off, or if my mother had not gotten sick, whatever these things are, whatever the disaster is that you're facing, it's probably not permanent. And a good coach, a good leader is going to ask you questions that are going to help you find clarity, and they're going to help you realize there are seasons in life. And some are ugly, and some are awesome. But if you can find your way through this moment, this uncertainty, you can hold on. And one of the most important ways to get through uncertainty is to realize that there are things in this life that are certain. There are things that are foundational. Yes, we can use a lift to overcome gravity. And there are those who say there are anti-gravity devices already created. In fact, a scientist recently disappeared who they thought was working on a project for anti-gravity. Who knows? Maybe it's already here. We just don't have access to it yet. But gravity is going to affect your life most of the time you're on this planet. The planet needs gravity. And should it be suspended for a period of time, the whole thing's going to be a mess. Hasn't always been like this. Won't always be like this. Pretty good philosophy to understand for clarity's sake, but then to also understand there are some things that they're just the nature of life, of humans, of this planet that we live on. So how did my client challenge me so deeply, in my opinion, disparaging my hero? My client mentioned that if this person really understood all the things that they teach, they wouldn't have the problems that they have. And then went on to say, well, this person has some kind of mental problem because they don't see that what they're telling other people to do isn't working for them. And I had a little pushback on that. And I had a bit of a, honestly, my own little emotional reaction to that. I felt like somebody, I grew up with two sisters, and I pick on my sisters all the time. I always have. I was a typical boy growing up. I was a jerk to my sisters. But that didn't give you permission to do it. I may rib my wife or make funny comments that I find are funny. And sometimes she'll correct me on them. Sometimes she just rolls her eyes and acts like I didn't say it. But I wouldn't recommend somebody else talk to my wife that way, especially if I'm around. That's kind of how it felt, like somebody was poking at my wife or poking at my sister, at one of my heroes. And I thought, obviously you don't know them, you don't study them like I've studied them, you haven't read what they've done and paid attention to their teaching for the last however many years. The client said, no, I haven't. I don't know anything about them. But I know this one person pointed out that if they did what you recommend as a coach, to do what you say you do, integrity, practice the things that you teach other people, and if the results are different, find another pattern, find another solution, find another process. If it's not working for you, why would you sell it to anybody else? That is an anchor philosophy of mine. But I also have to juxtaposition that concept as the mentor who says, I walked down that road before, I would not recommend that. Let me tell you what happened, not only to me, but to everybody else on that road. It was a really bad outcome. No, don't do that. On the other hand, after I went down that long road, I found this shortcut, and if you'll take this shortcut, you'll be way ahead. Those kinds of solutions, those kind of identifying the pain and the pathway and the process and finding a new procedure, highly recommend that as a leadership style, as a communication style. The whole reason that we tell stories in StoryPower is we mine through those things that were the pain of the past, the problems that we encountered, and we found a solution so that we can consolidate that into a short period of learning. Now, extrapolating that and applying it to your life, that may take hours, weeks, days, months, years. But understanding that we've identified the problem and we found a solution with proven results, you can tell that in 2 minutes or less if you know how to mine the story, craft the story, connect the story, and lead the narrative. That's what we teach at StoryPower. That's what brings clarity in a moment of fog. That's what coaching through a very quick story allows other people to kind of come up in their own awareness and go, oh, so it's kind of like, and when I lived through that, I did it like this. Deductive reasoning on the part of the person who's learning. Now, from that standpoint, yeah, don't teach somebody to do something that you haven't successfully done, because why would you do that? On the other hand, to understand that there are trial and error ways of learning, and sometimes we're learning while we're still in the trial. I've been fishing. It's a fishing expedition, really, on my motorcycle, my old bike. It's 21 years old. My old bike doesn't want to crank up right now. It cranked just fine when I parked it. And before the battery went dead, we'd go out once or twice a month and crank it up, fire it up, let it idle for a minute, make sure it stayed good. But then we went through a really weird cold snap in Texas, and it wasn't winterized. And so I've replaced the battery, and we've gone through, different sensors and things of that nature. And last night, while my wife and I were trying to get it started again, she found a video on a thing called the dead man switch, or the man down switch, also known as the upright switch. It's literally just a little curved piece of metal with a ring that slides from one side to the other. And if the bike tips too far or falls over, it's meant to be a kill switch that turns everything off. My question, though, was, is that kill switch for the fuel only, or is it for the entire power system? Because I got power. I can spray starter fuel into it and make it start, but I can't get it to keep running. So that's either a fuel pump or a relay. We replaced the relays that we thought belonged to it. That didn't fix the problem. So we still have a problem. But as we're watching these videos, here's what I'm finding. There are a whole lot of people that had the same problem, that along the path to the solution found different solutions on their way. For some people, that man down switch solved the whole problem. They replaced that one thing and they're good to go. $17. Ordered it on eBay, put it in, it's all good. Doesn't seem to be the problem with mine. It's that relay that controls the fuel pump. Ordered another one on eBay, waited 5 days, spent $100. Doesn't seem to be the problem with mine. Pulled the tank off, checked all the lines, made sure everything was in place, pulled the air filter off, cleaned the carbs. Doesn't seem to fix the problem. But see, for a lot of people along the way, those things that I'm trying and testing now, one of them was the solution for someone else. Why would I not document that journey? Why would I not say, here's what I've tried, didn't work for me, but I'm still going. Then I tried this, didn't work for me, but I'm still going. Then I tried this, didn't work for me, but I'm still going. Because for someone, they're going to realize, I didn't know there was a switch under the seat that shuts the whole thing down when it falls over. Clarity is kindness in leadership because we have the ability to step outside like the coach, to ask those curiosity-based questions, to face a scenario where someone else may be overwhelmed by emotion. They may be so deep in the problem, they can't even think their way out of it. Or like the tennis players. They may think, well, I've already figured that out. I've already solved that problem. I'm moving on to the next thing. But they really didn't actually solve the problem they had before. They've forgotten more about what they know than most people will ever know. But they've stopped applying some of the very basics. As my friend Jeff Hayward says, one of the most basics of all basics is the humility to realize you don't know it all. You might need somebody to come in from the outside and just give it another once over, give it another opinion. Do you know there's a reason that cars have fog lights that are positioned differently and they're different colors? Our little Volvo has one fog light on the back, which is really kind of unusual in my opinion. But when you flip that sucker on, it lights up for miles behind. I know because when I was in England, we used rear fog lights a lot. Now the front ones, if they're not mounted low enough and they're not a dark enough amber, when you turn them on, you get the same thing you get when you turn on your high beams in the fog. It all just reflects back at you. Those moisture particles reflect light and they will blind you in the fog. Adding more light doesn't change it. Adding the direction of the light or the color of the light or the wavelength of the light, that's what makes visibility in the fog easier. Easier for other people to see you, easier for you to see where you're going. That's the kindness of clarity. That's what a leader should be doing. Asking the questions that look at something from a different light, from a different angle, in a different way, and provide clarity by saying, have you thought about it like this? Now, you might take offense. You might be like my client who looked at my hero and said, well, obviously what they're doing isn't working. Well, not yet. But it doesn't mean that somewhere along the way, the ideas that they're trying wouldn't have already solved the problem for somebody else. Maybe the problem's bigger, and these are solutions along the way. Maybe these solutions have a compounding effect. When they're stacked together, they become the solution. It hasn't always been this way. It won't always be this way. But a good leader provides good clarity, kindness, through coaching, asking the right questions at the right time, and not letting go until the solution that actually works is found and applied. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. I'm Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day. There is a retreat coming up that I want you to know about. It's called the StoryPower Academy Retreat. This StoryPower Retreat is about focusing on your communication skills, taking them to the next level. Discover, develop, draft, deploy, and deliver some of the best stories you've ever learned. You're going to listen, create, connect, relax, and reflect around this beautiful lake scene in Granbury, Texas. It's a chance to rejuvenate and refresh and start over with some of the best training you can possibly imagine around storytelling, leadership, and communication. Join us.
Subscribe now for access to our extensive media library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. Begin your personal growth plan at StoryPower Academy.